Thanks, Aaron. Good evening, everyone. Well, given the company that I'm in tonight at the Australian Growth Company Awards, it would be complete BS for me to get up here and tell you I know the special sauce of leading growth companies. Granted, I'm the co-founder of a fast-growing company called Speak, but we're only 15 months old, and I think for those of you in the room who have had growth companies over far longer periods, you would agree that there's a certain cycle and rhythm that comes in businesses. So I don't think I'm qualified to provide advice to all of you as finalists. I think you all know what you're doing. But if you're like me and you're constantly thinking about lifelong learning as a journey and you're reading the books and listening to the podcasts, you're probably thinking, what do I need to do to keep succeeding? What do I need to do to be a leader of the future? And how do I create great cultures that support ongoing growth? We've got Nick Humphrey's book, so we've got some of the great research to lean on. And when I look at other research and sort of sum up how I distill the other research around Brené Brown, whether it's Tim Coyle, whether it be the Google Project Aristotle research, there are a number of things that I look at that I think there's a set of 5 skills and behaviours that ultimately keep coming through. The first of them is embracing vulnerability. The second of that is building belonging and connection, so making it safe for us to be in a team. The third is creating clarity on purpose, vision and values. So do we know where we're all going? Do we know what our values are? And more importantly, do we know what those values actually mean in terms of operational behaviours? The fourth is that we build bounce and resilience in ourselves as leaders, because if we're going to go and have a crack, we will fall and we need to know how to get back up again. And the fifth, I think I'd just generally sum up as being a good human. And for that, it's things like building self-awareness and self-compassion. And so when I look at all of this and, we've read all the material, there's no new ways of leading. There's different ways of distilling it down and different ways of explaining it to people, but for me, there's no new way. So if we know that, what I get curious about is why doesn't it work out like that all the time? What stops us from doing all the things that we know that we should be doing in organisations? What gets in the way for us? The research that Brené Brown did, which I'll touch on in a little bit, found a list of, there were 10 behavioural and cultural issues that get in the way of organisations. Things like the inability to have tough conversations, people getting stuck in setbacks, people not wanting to actually go and problem solve because they're too busy being busy and doing stuff, not having diversity and inclusiveness as part of their business, a whole stack of things. For me, what it all boils down to is fears and feelings. It's hard. It's much easier for us as leaders to go out and talk about what we want to do, what we want to build, which market we want to go into, the digital strategy, the growth plan. It's far easier for us to go and deal with these practical things. What's really hard for us as leaders, I think, is the bit about dealing with people. And we know how hard it is to deal with ourselves sometimes. And then we're going into organisations and we're trying to lead teams of people. We can set the right culture and what our intention is, but at the end of the day, we've got a whole group of people that we are, as leaders, are leading through an organisation. And as much as we think that we would like to make decisions with our brains, we are biologically wired to be constantly scanning, looking for danger, for going into fight or flight mode. So whilst we might want to make a decision using our brain, quite often we're making decisions based on our heart or our gut instinct. And our initial response, whether to getting an email or to having a conversation, is not, let me think cognitively through and logically through how I'm responding to that. It's we get a gut instinct. And so for me, that's what makes life challenging as leaders. It's the fact that we're leading ourselves and then we're leading teams of people. We don't like dealing with uncertainty and risk and emotional exposure, and that's exactly what vulnerability is. And that's why I wanted to share an experience with you tonight about a personal experience around embracing vulnerability and what it's meant for me. I think it's a game changer for us as leaders and how we lead our teams. And you'll be pleased to know that Brené Brown has done the research. She spent close to 7 years talking to a couple of hundred leaders around the globe. It didn't matter what industry she was talking to. One of the core skills that came out of her work from building courage was about vulnerability was the foundation skill for building courageous leaders. And the data that she'd done was then validated in instruments through Wharton and Kellogg Business Schools. The good news is that all of these skills are teachable, measurable and observable, so we can all learn them. Earlier this year, I became a Dare to Lead facilitator, and I've spent 3 days with Brené in the US learning about how to go and teach the Dare to Lead course. I've spent numerous years with leadership teams helping them through difficult situations. And I like to consider myself a relatively, self-aware and in-touch person with my own fears and feelings. But it wasn't until I ended up in hospital bed in May this year that I was really forced to confront my own vulnerabilities and embrace it. 5 months ago today, I woke up with a bad headache. And like most people, I went to work because, I had stuff to do, and that was really important. But within a week, I ended up in a hospital bed surrounded by neurologists, and I was down at RPA, and the neurology team said, bad news, you've got meningitis. And I'm going, oh shit, I thought I just had a headache. The good news is we don't think you've got any permanent brain damage, but it's going to take you a while to recover. And me thinking I've got a headache and I'm in hospital, but I'll be out in a week and back at work, was forced to confront this new reality that whilst I'm a co-founder of a startup and I'm doing lots of things and I'm on a board of a not-for-profit and I've got young kids, was going to be taking an extended period of time out of work. Clearly, it's been a good recovery because 5 months on, I'm standing here tonight and I'm back at work and, I can now write again and things like that. But the enforced time out of the office has really, the enforced time out to actually get better and then the time over the recovery process has really forced me to confront my own fears and feelings and to embrace my vulnerabilities. Things like admitting that actually I've got a chink in my armour. My immune system was not as strong as I thought it was. Then I start thinking about, well, what was it in my immune system? Diet, exercise, sleep, stress, all of the things that enable our immune system. What was it? What did I think was actually letting me down there? Things like I had to rely on other people. I had to rely on my teammates. I had to rely on other people to help at home. I actually had to ask for help, which felt really bloody uncomfortable for those of you that know me. I had to say no to things, which I really didn't like. And I had to set boundaries, and I've still had to do that. I had to admit that it was okay to say that there was a latent level of stress I was carrying, having left my role last year as a partner at EY and setting up a new business, that the weight of expectation and that there was a fear of failure. And I had to own up to this. Well, I had plenty of time sitting in bed resting for a couple of months to own up to all of this. There are a stack of myths around vulnerability. For men, it's particularly that vulnerability is a weakness. I think for me, even as a woman, there was a myth around vulnerability as a weakness because as a woman starting out in work when I did, I felt like I couldn't show emotion because it would be held against me. There's a general myth for women that anything less than perfect is a vulnerability. And so I think for all of us, we create these stories in our head. But the research was that all of these myths about vulnerability are exactly just that. They are complete and utter myths. The research found that if we want to be courageous leaders, vulnerability is actually the foundation skill set that's needed to become a brave and courageous leader. It's vulnerability that actually enables us to go and do the things that you've done tonight, like create growth, take risks, fail, get back up again, and go again. We feel brave and afraid at exactly the same time, and that's perfectly okay. It's not one or the other. It's natural to feel both at the same time. And the problem is it feels uncomfortable, so we go, oh, I'm not quite sure that that's right, maybe I'll try something else, or maybe I won't step out there in the arena. What the research all shows is that embracing vulnerabilities in teams creates better outcomes. So So there was a research paper that was done by a guy called Peter Skillen, who did the marshmallow test, and he gave a bunch of spaghetti, I think it was 20 strands of spaghetti, a marshmallow, a bit of sticky tape, and some string, and he gave it to groups of 4 people in groups. There was a group of lawyers, a group of CEOs, a group of MBA business students, a group of kindergarten kids, there was groups of everyone. And he went and gave it to all of them, gave them a time limit and said, go and build the tallest tower you can. And the team that won, that built the tallest tower, was the kindergarten kids. And his analysis was really around, it wasn't the smartest people in the room, it was not the people that had the most rules and order about how do we actually go and get this thing built. It was the people that just stood alongside each other, shoulder to shoulder, and just started having a go and building stuff and seeing what happened, which fits really neatly, Nick, with your concept around, creating this unbounded leadership concept. So how do we foster vulnerability in teams? There's a couple of things. First, it's leaders first. Leaders first and leaders often. If we're not showing vulnerability as leaders, no one else in the team will. And all of the research says that the leaders, we have to go first. So if you want to create trust and belonging in your teams and make it safe for other people to fail and to lead and to come up with new ideas and to deliver bad news, you must be first as the leader and show vulnerability. How can you demonstrate vulnerability in your team? If you're brave enough, you can sit down and have a conversation and ask people, or send them an email, but having a conversation's better. What's one thing you want me to keep doing, and what's one thing you want me to stop doing? That's brave. That's demonstrating vulnerability. Going out, not knowing what the answer to the question is, but asking it anyway. And the third thing I'd say is aim for candour and connection in all of the conversations that you're having, even if they're difficult. Don't go for brutal honesty. I posted something on LinkedIn this week. I was playing around with those Apple emojis on the new setup, and my son told me, oh yeah, that looks good, but you need to make your eyes more tired in the emoji. And I was like, thanks, you ticked brutal honesty. I was looking for a bit more warm candour, but I got his point. Tim Coyle in his book talks about Danny Meyer at his restaurants. They sort of have a philosophy that whenever someone new starts on their first day in the restaurant, they say to them, go out there, you're going to make 10 mistakes today, and when you do, make sure you come back and find me because I've got your back. That's giving people permission to go out and have a crack, screw it up and come back again, back to the nest. So if there is a secret sauce to leadership, I think it's embracing our own vulnerabilities. I think by acknowledging our own fears and feelings and that of the people in our teams who we're leading, that goes a long way. If you do this, we'll build trust, we'll build connection, we'll build belonging, we'll build great cultures, and the growth will take care of itself. Thanks.